All right, and we're live. All right. Well, hey everybody. My name is Jeremy Nichols, and I'm the Climate and Energy Program Director for Wild Earth Guardians. And today we're having our second Facebook Live check-in, our second in a series of weekly Facebook Live check-ins that we hope to continue. We kicked it off last week. We checked in on our Colorado for Clean Air campaign, which is our campaign to rein in the oil and gas industry's air pollution in Colorado, to try to protect Coloradans and protect clean air and the climate. That was great. In case you missed that video is on Wild Earth Guardians Facebook page, so you can go and you can check that out. And if you have any feedback on it, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. We're trying to create a very interactive experience here for people, and we want to give folks an opportunity not only during the live event to ask us questions and to try to learn more, but also after the fact if you have questions or have any insights. So keep the interactions coming all the time. So I am here in our Denver office in Denver, Colorado, just so everybody knows. But Wild Earth Guardians is a West-wide environmental group. We work on wildlife conservation, public lands issues, river conservation issues throughout the American West. And sorry about that. And we have a climate and energy program, and our climate and energy program works hard to do what we can here in the American West to safeguard the climate, and a lot of that involves confronting the fossil fuel industry, and in particular coal and oil and gas production here in the American West. So these Facebook Live events, we're trying to focus on a theme, trying to get really have some, do a deep dive basically on issues that we're tackling, campaigns that we're tackling. And today we wanted to talk about our campaign to protect the greater Chaco region, permanently protect the greater Chaco region from fracking. And today we're going to try something here. I'm going to try to bring in Rebecca Sobel, my Climate and Energy Program Senior Campaigner. And she is on the front lines in the greater Chaco region, literally working to build power, to people power and political power to help us protect the greater Chaco region. So I'm going to, pardon me here as I sometimes fiddle with the screen, because we're trying a function on Facebook Live where we can invite guests in and they can be a part of our conversation. So hopefully this will work. Let's see. Trying to add Rebecca Sobel here with us. There she is. Oh my gosh, it worked. Yay.
It works.
So Rebecca is in Santa Fe, works out of our Santa Fe office. And I'm going to be checking in with her as we do this Facebook Live event. But first off, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give just a little bit of background here, and then I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca. We did get a few questions that were emailed to us over the past week. So I'll throw those your way, Rebecca, and let's try to give people just a good deep dive on our Greater Chaco campaign. So Greater Chaco region is in northwest New Mexico. At its heart is Chaco Canyon, and folks might be familiar with Chaco Canyon and Chaco Culture National Historical Park. It's an area of immense cultural interest. It was the home of the ancestral Pueblan who built large villages, large pueblos, large houses, and some of the largest ones and most significant ones are in the Chaco Canyon area. But the footprint of the ancestral Pueblan civilization that existed around 1,000 years ago, it really expands way beyond Chaco Canyon. It actually expands not only throughout northwest New Mexico, but even into southwest Colorado, southeast Utah, and northeast Arizona. So really all that Four Corners region. And we've been working in this area for quite a while to try to protect wildlife, clean air, and clean water from oil and gas development, fracking in the area. But about 4 or 5 years ago, things really kicked up. What happened was the advent of horizontal drilling and fracking of shale formations really took off. And what we started noticing is that oil and gas development and extraction activities were inching closer and closer to Chaco Canyon. Basically, with the advent of fracking, the industry realized it could tap a lot more of that region and start to develop and extract oil and gas. This not only raised red flags for us in terms of the impacts to the cultural integrity of the landscape, but also in terms of impacts to the climate, our clean air, clean water, kind of the basic things that we're working to protect. So over the years, this campaign has developed, our campaign to permanently protect the greater Chaco region. And it's been multifaceted. It's involved leveraging litigation and legal pressure building people power on the ground in the greater Chaco region, particularly among our indigenous allied communities and together with indigenous allies, including there's Navajo residents who live in the area now, and of course modern day Pueblos who have very strong ties to the region. It's very special to them, and Rebecca's doing a lot of work with them, and we're also working to build political power. The political power right now is in the form of proposed federal legislation that would take the first step of trying to protect the greater Chaco region. It would withdraw minerals within 10 miles of Chaco Culture National Historical Park and kind of set the stage for winding down oil and gas production within that area, that 10-mile area. And we've been very clear, we support the legislation, but we want to see it go further, and that's what we're continuing to do, to make sure that this is the first big step and that we set the stage for additional steps. So I just want to talk about our legal work real quick. Was it May or March? May.
March 2015 was first launched.
So we've been on the legal front lines.
But we won in May. Sorry, we won in May. We filed March 2015. That's
right. So we've been on the front lines of defending Greater Chaco in the courtroom, together with other allies, including the Western Environmental Law Center, Diné Citizens Against Ruining Our Environment, the San Juan Citizens Alliance, NRDC, and most recently the Sierra Club. And we've been partnering up to try to hold the BLM accountable to accounting for the broader impacts of allowing fracking in the greater Chaco region. And it's been quite a slog. Rebecca mentioned we filed this lawsuit originally in 2015. We moved for an injunction and we lost, and it was really a bummer. But we appealed to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, the Federal Court of Appeals. We thought we had a chance, but we lost there too. So we went back to court in New Mexico, and the judge ultimately ruled against us in 2018, unfortunately. But we've remained undeterred, and so we appealed again to the 10th Circuit, and this past May we won. We finally won, and it's really a testament to the need for persistence on these issues. I know a lot of people get disheartened when we file a lawsuit and we might lose the first time around, and it is disheartening. But we keep it up, and we do achieve success. So we filed in 2015, and here we are in 2019, 4 years later, and we won. We won. It was well worth the wait and well worth the persistence. And what the win means is that the BLM can't approve fracking in the greater Chaco region unless it accounts for the broader regional implications of allowing this fracking. And by implications, I mean impacts to our climate, to health, to clean water, to the cultural integrity of the landscape, and to water quantity in the area as well. The 10th Circuit Court of Appeals really specifically dinged the BLM for ignoring water quantity impacts related to fracking, because as a lot of folks know, fracking is a very water intensive practice. And that was great. We're working to leverage that ruling right now. We've called on the BLM to heed the ruling and to impose a moratorium on new fracking in the greater Chaco region, which many allies have supported, including many of our tribal allies. And we've also just this month filed a new lawsuit, and it's actually a really big deal. We're basically trying to leverage this court precedent that we got to try to put the brakes on what's happening there right now. The big enabler is the U.S. Bureau of Land Management, and the U.S. Bureau of Land Management is a Trump administration agency, and they're within the Department of the Interior. And the Department of the Interior, ever since Trump came into office, has made it clear that it's oil and gas above everything else when it comes to the lands and the resources they manage. That includes, our public lands. It includes wildlife. Oil and gas comes first. Everything else gets thrown under the bus, and that's the mindset that dominates right now in Greater Chaco. That oil and gas should take precedence over Navajo community health, over clean air, over climate, you name it. The 10th Circuit win that we got in May is a really important bulwark to try to turn back the fracking tide. But it's requiring more persistence on our part. And so we did file this new lawsuit. We filed it together with a motion for a restraining order. So we're trying to really send the message to the BLM, like, you got to stop right now. And we're waiting for a hearing to be set in that case. We're feeling very confident. Our suit targets over 200 drilling permits that were issued during the pendency of our original case, and some were approved even this year. And so we're hoping to leverage our big win to achieve some semblance of restraint. And we're very excited. We're working together with a lot of our same partners, and we'll see where it goes. We're hopeful. Going into courts is never slam dunk. There's always risk that goes along with it. And sometimes you got to lose before you win. So we'll keep it up. In the meantime, Rebecca, I wanted to just kick it to you in terms of just what's happening right now on the ground in the greater Chaco region, both in terms of some of the people power building that's going on, but in terms of impacts. And I understand that just this past weekend, there was kind of a fracking reality tour that was held in the region to try to help bring awareness to what's happening and help people understand the need for a moratorium on fracking and higher or greater protections for public health.
Sure. First, just hi, everyone. I don't think I've met everyone that's watching yet, but like Jeremy mentioned, I'm the senior climate energy campaigner for Wild Earth Guardians, and I have the privilege of getting to work with some of the Navajo communities and other nonprofit groups and tribal folks that are working to protect the greater Chaco area. And like Jeremy mentioned, it is a vast landscape. It's a vast landscape, and the way that we work and the way that our coalition works is we support common sense protection. So the landscape is a checkerboarded region of tribal, state, federal, and allotment land. And like Jeremy said, it's the Bureau of Land Management that's been this big culprit that's been approving new, I call them industrialized fracking wells. But they've approved more than 500 of these wells since the advent of horizontal drilling. And I want to take a moment to talk about what that really means on the ground. So traditional vertical wells would go about 1,000 feet into the ground, drill oil and gas, come right back out. New horizontal wells will go up to 10,000 feet in the ground and make a right angle and go up to 2 miles in every direction underground. And so the subsurface impacts of this industrialized fracking are much different than traditional oil and gas drilling. And this is a region, like Jeremy mentioned, that in the north had a lot of fossil fuel extraction, resource extraction too. In 1968, the Nixon administration officially declared the Navajo Nation an energy sacrifice zone. So folks on the ground have been dealing disproportionately with environmental justice impacts for decades. But this new advent of horizontal drilling has moved this resource activity further south and east, and directly adjacent greater Chaco archaeological artifacts, but part of the greater Chaco landscape. And like Jeremy mentioned, it is the home of ancestral Puebloans and now 20 modern day Pueblo tribes. And what we also do is we're echoing the common sense call for tribes that all of the development that's been happening in the area is happening because BLM is using an outdated plan from 2003 that says that the industrialized activity that's happening now is never going to happen. And they never analyzed those impacts. They never did cultural resource inventories. They never did ethnographic studies. They never did health impacts assessments. They never did social impacts assessments. They've just been permitting and allowing more than 500 new industrialized wells to besiege the area. And when that happens, you've got these major oil and gas giants and these huge tankers and truckers barreling through these old dirt roads that are community roads. And the tour that Jeremy was mentioned was led by one of the members of our Chaco coalition, Council Delegate Daniel So. He's a council delegate of the Navajo Nation. And I've had the privilege of getting to work with him for the past 5+ years. And he takes folks out in the area and just drives them on the roads and shows them the impact of these oil and gas activities. It's a spider web. I mean, it really industrializes the landscape. And just, I wouldn't call myself on the front lines. I get to live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I have the privilege of getting to show up in Navajo chapters and listen to folks on the ground tell their stories about what it's like to live with oil and gas. And the stories we hear are about the noise, the truck traffic, the complete disrespect and disregard for the community members. We've got stories of school buses and ambulances unable to go down these roads because oil truckers are either trafficked up or not allowing them through, or have degraded and created such bad ruts that community members can't use them anymore. a few years ago, there was an explosion that happened near the Nageezi chapter of Navajo Nation. 36 storage tanks exploded in a fire that burned for 5 days. There's still not been an investigation that's happened as to the cause of that, and they're permitting.
And Rebecca,
Yeah,
if somebody would have lived near that, I mean, it would have decimated them. So it just underscores like every one of these well sites is a time bomb potentially.
And that's the thing, people do on the Navajo Nation live near them. You know, federally, there tend to be 600-foot setback standards. Up in the greater Chaco area, people are living as close as 300 feet to fracking wells. And people did live close to the explosion. They still haven't been allowed to return home. Over 55 people were evacuated. And, you know, the craziest thing about it is the news was slow to cover it, and it's members of our coalition who are out there with cell phones documenting that these events are happening. And we continue to record violations and conduct health surveys and collect data and stories from communities that are asking for the BLM to slow down, to stop putting oil and gas first, to do all of the comprehensive environmental, ethnographic, and public health studies done by tribes when they're ethnographic studies too, but ask for these first before we leap into a new industrialized landscape development. The Greater Chaco landscape is too sacred to lose, and the management of the landscape needs to be different than BLM's rubber stamping of industrialized fracking.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for sharing all that, Rebecca. And you know, both Rebecca and I have been out there. We've seen firsthand. Rebecca more so than me, even. But you know, for anyone familiar with this landscape, I mean, you know how powerful it is, and how just amazing it is to think about this civilization that thrived here 1,000 years ago, and just what was going on there, and how we still have signs of that today. I mean, it's really you know, American cultural heritage, and then to see what industry is getting away with right now, and you know, not only in terms of the cultural impacts and the heritage impacts, but to modern day Navajo communities. I mean, it's absolutely horrendous. So I want to check in a bit more. So there is this coalition called the Frack Off Chaco Coalition, which we use coalition, but it's kind of small c coalition. There's nothing really formalized, but there is a tight bunch of people that have come together and really gotten stronger over the years when it comes to stepping up to defend Greater Chaco. Rebecca, share a little bit more about that, because there's a website for the Frack Off Chaco Coalition.
Sure.
Yeah,
there was a website and a Facebook page. They're both Frack Off Chaco, and the Frack Off Chaco Coalition, or the Greater Chaco Coalition. We use those words interchangeably often. It is a small c coalition in the sense that it's a collaborative effort between indigenous community leaders, native groups, and nonprofits, environmental nonprofits, public lands, water protectors, in New Mexico and across the Southwest, and actually across the country, that are working together. And I think it's important to note that it's not a big C coalition, which might be nonprofit jargon for a lot of folks watching, but we work together because we know not one constituency has all the answers. You know, firstly, the Bureau of Land Management is supposed to be working with the Bureau of Indian Affairs on working on a plan for Greater Chaco landscape management. We're not sure if that's really happening, but they're doing it because this issue is the first time, at least as far as we're aware, and certainly in modern history, that the Navajo Nation and the All Pueblo Council of Governors has come together and asked for Greater Chaco protection and to be involved in the landscape management. They've actually asked for a moratorium on drilling until this new resource management plan that analyzes the impacts of this drilling has taken place. And our coalition amplifies those efforts. You know, we're not an official government entity. We do have some political delegates and folks working with us. And we also know that the folks that are living in the tri-chapter area of Navajo Nation, right next to oil and gas, have different stories than the El Pueblo Council of Governors that represents 20 modern day Pueblos. And then also, Wild Earth Guardians and our environmental groups, we're certainly working to advance a climate action message. You know, the area is the home to the nation's largest methane cloud. It's a methane cloud visible from space the size of Delaware. And if Greater Chaco is fully developed, and more so if New Mexico's southeastern Permian Basin, Greater Carlsbad area is further development, it could be responsible for more than 1 degree of warming in the global climate alone. So on the backs of this energy sacrifice zone and the backs of tribal communities, we work to support each other's efforts. You know, as an environmental nonprofit, we try to support resources and opportunities. We work together on events. We work together at lobbying and going to Washington, D.C., and just sharing the message of people first instead of rampant fracking. And it's been for me, it's been a very profound and humbling experience. I get the pleasure of working with some really amazing people. And I think the work is certainly far from over. We talk about tribal consent instead of tribal consultation, referring back to the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People and free prior informed consent, where we can't just let the oil and gas industry run amok and in some cases, have people sign things under false auspices or not understanding the full cumulative impacts of the activities that they're signing their name to, and really getting the short end of all the sticks of economic development. And we know that wouldn't happen if tribes were in the driver's seat. So at every opportunity, we're working to try to diversify the table of decision making and really push for joint cultural landscape management. So because this Greater Chaco landscape is so significant to so many distinct groups and governments specifically, it's really important that they have equal seats at the table and that they're involved in the management and planning for the landscape.
Right. That's great. So a couple things. First off, thank you for everybody who's tuning in here. We're getting some great comments, and thanks for all your kind words. Thanks for your support. We couldn't do it without the support of our members and people who like what we do. So thank you so much. And if you're just tuning in, again, my name's Jeremy Nichols. I'm the Climate and Energy Program Director for Wild Earth Guardians, and we're doing our regular weekly Facebook Live check-in. It happens every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. And I have with me today Rebecca Sobel, who works as my and she just left, it looks like. She works as my climate and energy senior campaigner. Rebecca, let's see if I can get you back in here. At least you're not on my phone. There we go. All right.
Got it.
So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Rebecca, so we try to keep these to about a half an hour. So we've got a few more minutes left. We might go a little over today because this is a really big issue. There's a lot going on. But I really appreciate all the insight you're bringing, Rebecca. Rebecca's down in Santa Fe. She's usually on the ground, on the front lines in the Greater Chaco region. The other big thing that's developed over the years is that we have federal legislation proposed. And New Mexico is so fortunate to have elected officials who are true champions for the Greater Chaco region, including U.S. Senators Martin Heinrich and Tom Udall, and U.S. Representatives Ben Ray Lujan and Representative Deb Haaland. Both amazing champions, not only for the Greater Chaco region, but for the environment and our health as well. But they proposed legislation that would withdraw minerals within 10 miles of Chaco Canyon and adopt some other, I guess, provisions that would help wind down oil and gas development within that area. Rebecca, can you give us an update on that? Just where do things stand and where do we see things going?
Sure. So the 2019 Chaco Cultural Heritage Protection Act, which is sponsored in full by the entire New Mexico delegation, including Representative Xochitl Torres Small, who represents the south of New Mexico.
Thanks for
that. That legislation, so it was first introduced last year and it was limited to a 10-mile buffer. And actually a lot of members of our coalition came out and said outright that that was not enough. And then when it was introduced, we got the opportunity to work with Senator Heinrich and Senator Udall and Congresswoman Haaland and Congressman Ben Ray Lujan. And they came up in April, actually, with the House Natural Resource Committee and did a field visit, which was a really big deal. It's not often that politicians from DC show up in the Eastern Agency of Navajo Nation, and they did a fracking reality tour, and they viewed well sites in the area, and they had Earthworks, an organization that we work with, had a FLIR camera there, and they were getting to look at all of the noxious air chemicals that are coming out of these wells.
Horrible.
It impacted them. And the new bill, its introduction reflects some of those changes that we had recommended, which includes a provision to slow the drilling so that when wells aren't producing, we have a mechanism to retire them. That mechanism doesn't even exist anymore, which just sort of tells you how powerful oil and gas is. And then also to acknowledge that while there's a 10-mile buffer, this is no way inclusive or all-encompassing of the Greater Chaco landscape. And in fact, while we do support this legislation, we continue to call for increased landscape management protections and increased landscape protections because 10 miles is not nearly enough. And on top of 10 miles not being enough, the BLM is continuing to approve new drilling within that 10-mile buffer anyway. So since then, the Secretary of the Interior, David Bernhardt, also came out to Chaco and visited with Senator Udall, but he did not take the fracking reality tour with us. And he said that he would honor the 10-mile buffer for a year voluntarily. And so what we have right now is this like very flimsy level of protection that's not assured for a year. And in the meantime, BLM is not moving forward with its comprehensive land management plans. And so far, we have no indication that those plans will be inclusive of significant or meaningful tribal input or environmental justice or public health protections. So we're in a little bit of a game of wait and see. We're waiting for the bill to see where it moves on the Senate side and see if we can get it passed in this Congress and signed by this president. And then even if it gets passed, we're still waiting for this new resource management plan. We're waiting 5 years now for this new resource management plan to come out. And that'll be a whole other story once that happens, because we would hope to assume that BLM would take the enormous amount of public outcry, the significant opposition from tribes, you know, the legal challenges and the court victories we've had, and start to manage the land differently. But I don't know if I'll believe it till I see it. We've got more fights in the barrel.
No, that's where we're at. I mean, we'll believe it when we see it. I mean, here's the thing. We got the courts behind us. We got people behind us. We have the politicians behind us. And yet we are not getting anywhere because of the Trump administration, because of their utter and complete disdain for indigenous justice, for environmental justice, for cultural protection, for the climate, clean air, you name it. Like I said earlier, it's oil and gas above everything else for the Trump administration right now. Well, this has been great, Rebecca. I think we're going to wrap it up here. The one thing last thing I want to ask that people have been asking, how can they get involved? What can they do? How can they plug in? What?
So if you want to stay abreast of our coalition efforts, you can sign up on our email list on frackoffchaco.org. The best way to stay up to date is to follow us on Facebook. We post all related groups and coalition events on that page. You can follow us on Wild Earth Guardians Climate West too, to get updates on all of our administrative and legal work. 4 times a year, the BLM is continuing to offer more land in this area and in New Mexico at large for more oil and gas drilling. So we're constantly engaged, and we're always asking folks to write letters to the Bureau of Land Management and write letters to not only the New Mexico congressional delegation, but your congressperson, and really call for diversified landscape management and protection. We need tribes to have a seat at the table, and we need to make sure that the climate and public health are protected when we're managing oil and gas, because what's happening in Chaco is actually happening all across the West. It's this ramrodding and mismanagement of BLM's oil and gas leasing program. And it's happening because the public isn't standing up also to demand that it stops. Never has the leasing program ever undergone a cumulative environmental analysis. That means that the government has never assessed what the full impacts of giving away all public lands for industrialized fracking means. And now that the nation is a net oil exporter, and now that fracking is some of our highest climate creating pollutions, we really have to be calling for real systematic reform and management. And that certainly starts or it can help with protection of the greater Chaco landscape, but it needs to ripple far beyond. And so certainly following us in our efforts in supporting better cultural landscape management is helpful, but then also really going to the root of the problem and calling on this administration for some real just transitions to renewable energy.
Yeah, that's great. And that's a great segue to what we're going to talk about next week. We're actually going to talk about our efforts to protect public lands throughout the American West from fracking. And we're going to give you some updates. We actually had a federal court hearing this week that seemed to go really well, and we'll fill you in more on those details. But just so it's clear, Wild Earth Guardian's vision for our public lands here in the American West is a future where fossil fuel development is not allowed, where we have a ban on fracking and a ban on coal mining. That's what we're working toward here. It's obviously not going to happen tomorrow, but that's the vision that we're working toward. So onward and upward there. And yeah, thanks, Rebecca, for that. I really appreciate it. Please follow us on social media. The Climate Energy Program is at Climate West on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. That's Climate West, all one word. Follow Wild Earth Guardians, Wild Earth Guard on Twitter. It's at Wild Earth Guard. And then on Facebook, obviously, at Wild Earth Guardians, which you know because you're here watching right now. And sign up for our email list on the Frack Off Chaco email list and on the Wild Earth Guardians email list. It's a great way to stay plugged in and to get updates on how you can stand with us to take action for Greater Chaco and for public lands and the climate throughout the American West. So this has been great. We're going to keep this up. This is our second Facebook Live check-in. Last week seemed to go really well. Got some good feedback. And we'll keep it up next week and hopefully make this a legitimate weekly event. So please spread the word that we're doing this. We want to interact. We want to get folks engaged. We love being able to share more details and to give you a firsthand account of what we're dealing with in terms of these big, very significant campaigns. And most of all, we just want to be available to answer questions and provide whatever insight you might need to better understand what Wild Earth Guardians is doing to make the world a better place, basically. So tune in next week, 1 p.m. Mountain Time, right here on the Guardians Facebook page. And thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who interacted today. Thanks for the great comments. Looks like our friends with Colorado Rising were on today. They're great allies here in Colorado. We're working right now with them to confront the oil and gas industry, try to rein in fracking. So that's great. Thanks. And feel free to email in the meantime with any questions or any comments. My email is jnichols, that's JNICHOLS @wildearthguardians.org. And Rebecca, what's your contact?
I'm at rsobel, RSOBEL @wildearthguardians.org. Just want to thank everybody for your support and for tuning in and for being a part of the movement to keep fossil fuels in the ground. And let's continue trucking on together.
Awesome. Onward. Thanks, everyone. Take care.